Hi, welcome to our webcast for Making Change Stick for measured and lasting business change. And those words are chosen really carefully. The key ones being change, what it's all about. I'm going to share some experience with you around change. The stick word is all about how you get the thing to land and be executed in a fashion that means it provides a return on that effort and money and time that you've put in to land it, and it keeps going. That's the stick element. Measuring is all about knowing what good looks like. This is a massive, go that way, massive measure symbol for big picture. And for lasting outcomes is really all about the stick element and how we continue that. So I'm going to share some relevant experience with you. We're then going to a start, a middle and an end. It'd be really good if you've somehow got hold of the prop that we use with Big Picture. I'll introduce that in a moment, because you can then follow along, and it's all about making and doing this webcast. I don't really want you just sat there. I know it's difficult because there's probably just yourself watching this, but actually this is meant to be an exercise that you do with colleagues or people who are interested in the business in any form of size of team. So it could be one-on-one, groups of 3 or 4 coming together in a bigger group, and then really covering the whole organization. So that's what Big Picture brings to the party. It brings all those people together. A little bit about Big Picture and where it came from. If you haven't watched my video, in the past, I've been frustrated with the levels of engagement I wanted to achieve in the time that I had on projects, mostly business change, but also people development type programs. And so I used to develop these doodles and ways of working and talking that used to draw people in. And I was asked increasingly to do that in different scenarios, whether it's an SME, a corporate, private sector, public sector. And I just felt these doodles and patterns worked. They were quite visual, quite colourful at times, more even to do with the way they kind of laid out on the page, so a template. So it became a set of symbols and a template, which I then lifted out the book and turned into Big Picture, the product, which is now driving the programs, the workshops and the kits. Well, let's get into my experience of change and how it can stick. So I mentioned before, ideas are cheap and landing and execution is everything. It's all about taking those ideas and actually identifying them, defining them and putting them down in a way that everybody gets. So it's about identifying, it's about defining, doing it and measuring it. So it's all about going through those stages, and at each point having great conversations and resolving any conflicts between the different people in the business that you have to engage with. And that comes on to my third point, which is engaging the right people. So for change to stick, you need to know who the stakeholders are, both on the project and also in the business, and determine what drives them, what are their measures, why are they behaving the way they are, and how are they going to get engaged with the change that you're bringing into the business. What Big Picture does really well without you even realizing it is draw all those things together in a way that feels really natural and is just a good conversation. It's not something you have to work that hard at. It's actually a very natural process and something everyone can buy into. So what I'm going to do now is take you through the start, the middle and an end. Try and do it in 10 or 15 minutes or so, and we'll see how we go. If you've not got the prop in front of you, then get a piece of paper and draw out. If I just share with you what I've got here on screen, here, what I'd like you to do, if you can see that, so what we've got is your prop here. And what I'd like you to do is, you can see on this version, I've put your Big Pick as the example, but actually we're going to talk about a fictional company called Service Co. Service Co, that is, as in short for company. So instead of where I've written your Big Pick, if just in the top left of your paper, just so you can follow along, you put the name of the company, Service Co, and you can see at the top of the page there, I've got a green area, and that's where we write the purpose of the company. So the reason we're doing this is because this is going to give us the canvas or the backdrop on which to land some of the ideas that we're going to have. So just right at the top of the page, I can read out what I've got for Service Co's purpose, which is to provide a reliable customer service 365 days, 24/7. So I've got a version of this in the background, but what I'd like you to do is to follow along on your piece of paper, and then we'll maybe compare at the end. Okay, and sometimes to the right hand side where we've got the white space, it's just an A4 sheet there, so you've not got much room, but actually we put in some core values. So if we were using the big picture, the bigger version of the template, and I know this is just a backdrop behind me, but actually we do deal in large physical props, then actually you would have a sense of the kind of size and the level of engagement you get by using kind of spaces and walking in and out of, and actually associating yourself with the physical props, and that leads to, again, really good conversations and connections. So back to the prop, which hopefully you'll have started doodling on at this point. You can see a layout in the center of the page here, so I'm just going to highlight that for you. Spotlight. So basically around here, so we've got the measure symbol here, and running left to right across the page we have the customer journey. And if you've got a yellow pen, and you don't necessarily need a yellow pen, but if you just run that line across from left to right, it's easier if you've actually got the template there, or the prop that's downloaded. And then you'll notice these boxes. So what we're simply doing here is marking out a bit of territory. So you've got the marketing area, the operations area, which has got kind of delivery in it, and that could be a product or service. And then we've got the customer care. So in this first section, I'm going to give you some ideas, and what I'd like you to do is to just land them on the page. So the first idea for service company is they've got a new bit of tech coming in. So it's for the business to help with their operation area. They provide a service, and this tech is going to help them with this service. So just have a think about which part of the business that might be relevant to. It could be, you think it's marketing, could be delivery, could be customer care. Have a little think. That's one around tech. It could be an improvement to the messages that are going out to the business. And indeed, it could be something around leading from a challenge around setting a really clear expectation with the customer up front as to how service company are going to operate. So again, make a note. That's the second one, about clearer messaging, setting service expectations. Just on this kind of mind mapping style, where do you think that might land on the page? And then we'll go for a third one, which is around the customer care. And actually a new team leader has come in. And actually what I'm going to ask you to do for this one is use this team symbol here, which you can see I've already plonked on here. If you just want to tear that off or cut it out, you can see there's some dotted lines around. If you haven't got a prop, you can just write it in. I'd like you to take that team symbol and just land it where you think on this layout that is relevant to. So remember, I've said it's a new customer care team lead, so I've given you a bit of a clue there, but just pick it up and plonk it on. So at this point, you should be starting to populate. I've given you 3. And what we're doing here, if you recall from the introduction, is giving you a place to represent the ideas that are coming into the business. So an idea can just exist in someone's head or just be a description or what have you. But actually what we're doing here is we are giving you a place to put the ideas that are coming in. So immediately by putting them outside your head onto a physical, into a physical space, and we always start with the kind of analog physical prop, not tech. It gives you a good chance to describe that idea in a different kind of way. And we could use an opportunity symbol for that. If we go back to the template here, just to give you an idea. We've already used a team symbol, but actually what we could do here is use the opportunity symbol, which I'm just going to bring on here. So actually, if you just pick out, if you've already started tearing off, that's great. Pick up the opportunity symbol, and you could actually use that to maybe come up with one of your own opportunities or ideas for service company, something from your own experience, whether it's kind of compliance driven, whether it's people, process, or technology. Just maybe think of an idea and just get into the practice of landing it on the page. And I'll just give you a minute to do that. Okay, so hopefully you've got something on the page now that's starting to develop. And going back to my experience from earlier, it's all about defining this idea and getting it on the page. So what we're going to do now is move on. And actually, if you remember about measuring what's good and actually taking that level of agreement and definition to a point where you can measure it, we are looking to add a measure symbol. So if I go back into the share and you go back to your prop, what I'd like to do is draw your attention to this measure symbol here. Here we are, this one here, measure. Called it out earlier because it's on the board behind me. This measure symbol, I'd like you to think about each of the ideas or opportunities that I gave you, and maybe to just take one and think about the measure that you would apply to it. So if it's about setting service expectations and you've landed that one, think about the measure that would measure that. There's one I've used in a previous example that springs to mind, which is because the purpose of Service Co is to maintain that level of service for 365 days a year, 24/7. Actually, I had a challenge that I brought in the delivery space around minimizing the downtime. So that was an easy one to measure. It was almost measure-based by definition. Minimizing the downtime is actually measuring how much time the service is up and how much time the service is down. And I'll actually probably use that one in my example to bring out later when I show you what I'm developing here. But for you, if you just think about the measures that each of those ideas would be measured by, just to give you an example. And what you can probably start to do is think about the connections that you're making. So as an example, you've got a layout of the template, which you could use in many different ways. You have in total 8 different big picture symbols, which you can use in different ways. And it's actually the way you combine those symbols and the parts of the template that become really powerful, because that's naturally how we think, and making connections between things and spotting patterns and using that to demonstrate our understanding of something is what big picture is really good at, and actually where it actually comes in to our own. So let's move on. What I'd like you to do now is to, using again the same notes, is bring on the team symbol. You probably only got one, but what I'd like you to note, and we're getting onto the team kind of stakeholder area now. What I'd like you to think about is who are the different people who might be involved in this business that you might want to engage with, and we actually land those people in the same space. So I'm just going to reel them off and just have a think about where these people may sit within the business. So we've got the CIO, the Chief Information Officer, who might be related in some way to the technology that you're going to bring in. So if you've got technology already on there, then associate with that. You've got a kind of an account manager, which might be somebody to do with kind of supplier management. You've got the customer care team lead, who we've talked about. We've got an ops manager, which could be, well, think about where they might land in the business. I've called mine John, and you'll see that in the example. So try, if you want to compare with what I've got, try landing John, the ops manager, somewhere on your page, and use your team symbol to just move it along from where you used it previously to represent John, the ops manager. And then you've got the managing director that on this prop isn't really shown in any clarity, but on big picture, the bigger versions, you've got John, the ops manager, at the bottom of the page, buoying the whole business up. So what we've been through there is a bit of a three-stage process, and in a moment I'm going to show you what I've developed as mine just to kind of compare. Let me actually do that now. So if we compare your version to mine, let me just bring that up. And we share that. I think you should be able to see that. Let me just check that you can. There we are. So this is what I've got. So this is populate. So we went through, I've actually missed the name off here, which is a bit of a slip for me, but in the top left you should have service core. The purpose we went through at the top to provide a reliable customer service, 365 days, 24/7. I didn't really mention it, but one of the core values of service core is trust. So we would use the right-hand side here for trust. And just to pick out a couple of the examples I've given in case you can compare to what you've got, I'm going to draw out a number of little patterns here, which is just a bit of a subset of the whole thing. But on the left-hand side in marketing, when I mentioned earlier about setting service expectations, that would clearly land in the marketing space next to the customer journey. That's where I would see that. So what we're saying is we're processing that information, landing it on the page, so we can have a good discussion about it in our one-to-one, our small group or our bigger group. In the operations area, as I called it here, I mentioned earlier the example I was going to use was the minimizing downtime. So the idea being there, the change to bring in is kind of minimize the downtime, and that would be the challenge that we referenced with a measure, a minimized downtime, and that's where John, the ops manager, would come in. So your notes might not look anything like this, but the idea and the example I want to show is that actually what you have is a way of connecting together different symbols in different areas of the template, which lead to and develop and encourage excellent and massively powerful conversations about the business. And in our version of how change sticks, if we go back to the intro, is actually being able to fully understand what actually the execution element of an idea is. So taking an idea, getting it out of the heads, getting it onto the page in this form, but on a much bigger scale physically, so everybody can have a go and work it through. Choosing the right thing to change is really important, and what we mean by that is identifying it, defining it, doing it, and measuring it. And we've just given you a little insight into how we do that, and that exercise could take hours, could take a day or two, or whatever it is, to get to the point where you've chosen the right thing to change. And what I would say on that is I would just like to bring in this part of the template here, which you can see here. Let me just bring that up. Down here in opportunities, you've got a place to list all of the opportunities for change in the business, and it looks fairly straightforward because it's a small version of the prop, but actually what we're doing here is listing all the possible opportunities, but we're then using some criteria to prioritize. So the whole idea is here, it appears simple, but what we're doing is we're drawing all of the opportunities and ideas off the big picture that everybody's agreed as a ground truth. We're listing it in the opportunities, and then we're using some criteria to judge which of those ideas we're going to take forward. And then you might consider the kind of as-is view of the business and the to-be view, and what you need to do to get from one to the other. So there's quite a lot there. We start with the mind map in terms of big picture, setting out the agreed view of the business. We use that to land the ideas. Before we execute, we put some measure against those ideas and use some criteria to choose which opportunities we're going to take forward. And then what we'll do is an as-is and a to-be view of the business, which sets out how you map to go from one to the other. And that could be in the form of a project plan, or it could be quite something informal. It might use a Trello board, a Kanban board, something along those lines to plot how you get from one down to the other. So that comes to a close. I hope you've got some notes written down that make some sense and give you an insight into how Big Picture is going to work. I'm just going to jump to the Big Picture website to end on. So basically, as a little reminder, we sell programs, workshops, and kits. You can go and have a browse yourself. When I was talking earlier about the kits, this is the kind of scale I'm talking about. So if you take some of the ideas that I've talked about, but put it on this kind of scale, this is the activity kit as an example. You can see everybody gets involved. We use lots of large kits. Everyone has a good old chat. And actually, this is a rope-based product that we put on the floor. If we go back, we've got other kits that are all about supporting meetings and one-to-ones, and then we've got a workshop kit. So it's basically about taking that one idea, that intellectual property, that recipe, if you like, and actually building it into something that you can use as a team in any kind of environment. And we just go back. The workshops that we run, which those kits support, are all about bringing the team together. We can run an in-house workshop where we come into businesses and run a workshop for you, or we can run an open workshop where you actually come to us and you can contact us for details of when the next one is. And then in terms of programs, just think of programs as a sequence of activities that lead to some kind of outcome or objective. And we focus in two areas. We focus on developing people and also developing business. And that's what we do. That's what we specialize in. You can find out more at yourbigpick.com. This has been our webcast, so I'd be absolutely delighted if you leave some feedback, or what I'd love you to do is share the notes that you've made as I've been talking through around Service Co, to share that with me, and I can then have a conversation about how that might actually work in your business. So thank you for watching, and look out for the next Big Picture webinar or webcast, and we'll catch up with you soon. Bye.